sense.
I now call this meeting of the Silver Falls School District Board of Directors to order, and we will start with the agenda review. I will take a motion.
I'd like to move that we remove 5A3 and 5A4 from the agenda, as some things have come up and looking for information from some outside sources hasn't received yet.
Is there a second?
I'll second it. Yeah.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we remove 5A3 and 5A4 from the agenda. Open up for discussion. Phil, do you want to follow up on that?
Just that administration had some questions that were asked, and they were pursuing some responses and haven't heard back quite yet, and so instead of rushing it, to take it off for right now and bring it back.
Makes sense to me. Anybody else have anything? All right, let's take the vote.
Can I get clarification on who seconded the motion?
Josh? I did.
Thank you. Okay. Tom?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Owen?
Yes.
All in favor?
All right, we're going to move to number 3, Superintendent Report. Scott Drew, Superintendent. Tell us about the bond.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I'm going to wait for Daniel to pull this up. And all of you, I assume, are on Zoom right now, just muted. Is that correct? If you could all pull up the Zoom link, that would be great.
The Zoom link?
Yeah, Daniel's going to project it on your screen. Because it's going to be too hard for you to see it on the screen here.
Okay, I'm going to note that attendance while we're doing that. Derek's not here, and he let us know ahead of time.
Would that be underneath, Scott, the meeting, like, at the front of the meeting? Okay.
On board book.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not talking the link to your goals, we're just talking the link, the actual Zoom.
That'll get you to my presentation here. Otherwise, I don't really be able to see it back here.
There it is. It's,
You gotta go back to the actual,
The landing page for board meeting.
yeah.
You're going to get
no,
it there.
meeting, virtual meeting URL, that'll work.
Your iPad.
I think it's making my own.
Oh, that's,
Tomorrow. Yeah. All they need. is
everybody
Zoom.
mute. Got it.
I'll just forget it, I'll go with it,
Yeah.
it's fine.
You'll go with it up here?
Yeah.
Thank you for indulging me on that. I think it'll be easier for you if you're looking at some of the fine print right in front of you. And if you need to look on with a neighbor, that's fine too. So, good evening, everyone. I wanted to start off just by giving a couple of bond updates, if I could. The major focus for this week is to make sure that people know about applying for the Bond Oversight Committee. It's a really important function, and as we've talked about in the past, that's been a strategy we've decided to employ before the bond election to set up the Bond Oversight Committee beforehand. And all that goes back to the building of trust, so folks know exactly who will be overseeing the implementation of bond money for years to come, until 95% of those bond funds are actually spent. And so if you know of anyone, please continue to encourage them to apply. The deadline is the end of the day Friday. I have the process there in front of you. After we get all the applications, our team will go through and we'll review all the qualified candidates. Candidates that meet the basic standard of, for example, being within our district boundaries will will be a part of a collection of candidates that you will then come in and look at. I do want each of you to take a look at each of the applications and give me your advice as to who you'd like to see on the committee, and then I'll take that with me and then come up with a final list. Again, it's a list that you will approve as a board. So you have all of the authority here to make sure that you're comfortable with the list of candidates that will become the Bond Oversight Committee when the bond passes. And I will be coming back to you with that final list on October 9th, so the October regular board meeting. Any questions about that? Go ahead, Josh.
So Friday that I saw was the deadline that I saw in the email?
Yes, Friday the 29th, yes, this Friday.
And we still are requiring or do our best of our ability, having representation from every single school?
Yes, that's part of the, I want to say guiding principles, but we have a document that
So I'm
that goes
assuming
over
the
that.
principals are helping as well?
Yes. We already have 13 applicants at this time. But I would like to see more. I think when all told, I think we're going to have between 15 and 18. We will have one representative from each school community that I've promised every school community that would happen. The other is that we will have some positions for what we would say at large. So not just one person per school community, but a few at-large positions as well for folks who aren't necessarily connected to a school community, but are well-known in Silverton. Any other questions on that? Okay. The only other thing I was going to mention is that I will be making my rounds to PTC meetings from now until Election Day. And I will be taking with me to Silvercrest tomorrow. Erin has volunteered to come with me. Thank you so much, Erin.
The weather's great this time.
Yeah,
Perfect.
it is beautiful up there in the early evening. And if any of you would like to come with me on other visits, I'd really appreciate that. I was going to Central Howell today, but of course their meeting was at 6:30. Our meeting here is at 7, so I'll hit them the next round. But this is really the critical time. And basically, it'll just be sharing the 4-page informational flyer that's already been safe harbored by the Secretary of State, but also being there just to answer some questions, kind of like what Owen and I did at Emmanuel Lutheran Church last Thursday. So thank you for that. Any questions about that? Okay. Tom, also thank you for coming on Thursday as well. It's just great to have your presence there. All right, so we're going to talk about my goals for this upcoming school year, and they're a little similar to last year, but some of you are new on the board and you haven't gone through goals with me before. And so there's a couple of things I want you to keep in mind here. Number one is there's only one focus for Silver Falls School District, and that is the strategic plan. And so this strategic plan is a 5-year strategic plan, 2020 to 2025. So my goals are an operationalized version of the strategic plan. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we have a 5-year strategic plan, but every single year, if you've been on the board and worked with me over the past 3 years, every year we establish a focus. So this, in my opinion, is where strategic plans kind of wander off into the woodwork, because it's great to have a 5-year strategic plan and say that you do, but then you don't have anything each year that actually focuses on getting to the goals of what the board has originally laid out. And so that's what you see in front of you. So that's just another representation of the strategic plan. Our number one implementation is the Guaranteed and Viable Standards-Based Curriculum. I'll talk about that in a minute. And that goes to all students being on track to graduate, goal number one. And then the sense of belonging piece goes back to students learning social emotional skills so they can navigate their world. In my opinion, that's something that I would like to see change for the next strategic plan, because in 2018, when this plan was being written, that concept was still very new. And you cannot separate social emotional learning from teaching and learning. The two are inextricably linked. They're not two separate things. So we don't stop our school day and say, let's do SEL. It just doesn't work that way. Kids learn and feel all at the same time. So, but for this case here in the focus, I call it a sense of belonging. And when I walk you through what my goals look like, I think it'll make sense. And then the third, of course, is the facilities bond. And that is the most important challenge facing our school district. And we have a plan for that as well. And we're getting to the end of what has been 5 years worth of work to get to this point. So I'll share that at the end. So one of the things you also look at when you see the focus is this idea of teamwork and feedback. And you will see those two on a yearly focus as long as I'm in Silver Falls. Those are two characteristics of leadership and organizational improvement that I believe strongly in. I don't think you can have a successful organization without those two factors. They are also the two factors that rank the highest in the most advanced research on student achievement. Number one is collective teacher efficacy, which is just a fancy word for teamwork. And then you also see on there feedback. The effect size that starts to have a result in moving the dial for student achievement is 0.4. That's what they call the hinge point. And you can see that teamwork has an effect size of 1.57. So a 0.4, think about a 0.4, the hinge point, as 1 year of growth. So if a child's at 0.4 would be just a child goes through a year, a child's made a year's worth of growth. But what happens if that child is behind? They need to make up more than 1 year of growth in 1 year. And we know that most of our kids lost 2 years worth of their schooling, essentially, at differing levels, and each child is different. But if you look at the fact that collective teacher efficacy has a 1.6 effect size, that's 4 years worth of learning in one. When a team of teachers collectively believes that they can get all students to grade level. That's how powerful that is. What's even more interesting is that if you look at John Hattie's work, who's responsible for this research here, you will not find a greater body of evidence or research, as many meta-analyses wrapped into his work on visible learning anywhere else in the world. It is the premier research. It is the premier research body that has guided all of current education. And we employ 3 of those here in Silver Falls. So 3 of those most important factors that raise student achievement. So it's teamwork, feedback, and the other one says response to intervention. That's really kind of an old school way of what we now call multi-tiered systems of support. And so response to intervention, or you might have heard the term RTI, is really started back in the early 2000s. And now we've advanced that concept as in education to say, if we have our solid core program academically, that's great for all kids. So all kids receive quality teaching and learning, universal access, which is our guaranteed a viable curriculum. But then what happens if kids are not making progress as they should? Then what? Because it's not just going louder and slower the second time, like my dad would do when we travel to Europe. He'd just say louder and slower, thinking people would understand what he's trying to say. And that's the educational equivalent if you don't have a multi-tiered system of support, just feeding students the same stuff over, hoping they'll get it. And so So those three factors are what we've implemented here and what we continue to implement in Silver Falls. So that's really positive. For the purposes of tonight, this always gets a little crazy, a little wonky, shall we say, that there's really two things that you will evaluate me on at the end of the year. One is my goals that I'm going to share with you tonight on the left-hand side. And the other is the OSBA COSA superintendent standards. And there are 8 or 9 of those. And so just know that I try to connect the two instead of just presenting my goals tonight, to just kind of familiarize yourself and try to show you how they connect. That make sense? All right, and so on the left-hand side, you'll see visionary district leadership. That would be standard 1 in the OSBA COSA standards. And what I want to start with is goal number 1 of my goals. And you can see up above, I tried to make the correlation there. And so I know that you probably don't appreciate being read to, but I think this is important since it's a public meeting also, just to go through this with you. And we'll start with goal 1. And goal 1 for me, I have 3 goals here, and each goal ties right back to the strategic plan. If you know, on the strategic plan, goal number 1 is all kids on track to graduate, and my goal number 1 is to improve the academic experience of all students in SFSD. Goes right back to the strategic plan, right back to our yearly focus. The other thing I want to mention, if you're new on the board, is that I do not present my goals in terms of numeric value. One is we don't have the types of assessments where that's even possible. And number 2, having a goal based upon a theory of action is exactly what that means. It means this is actually what we're going to do towards working as a school district to achieve the goals of the strategic plan. And this is what's worked for me. Instead of saying we're going to get our kids 80% meeting or exceeding on the state test and all that, there's so many more nuances that go into that. And I've always equated it as sort of having a frog here on the table and then taking bets to see how high the frog's going to jump. When you start to tie goals down to an exact number, and you're dealing with people and you're dealing with children, to me, I've never found a way that works. And so that's why I'm really thankful for theories of action, because they really talk about an if-then statement. Here's what we're going to do, and if we do this, then we expect these results. And so the first one is PLC is professional learning community. We have all those. Each teacher in our school district is assigned to a PLC. So if PLC shift the focus from intended curriculum to implemented and learned curriculum by utilizing their team's aligned standards-based assessments, then student outcomes will improve as core instruction and interventions improve in quality and focus. So you might have noticed in the if section, we are the only school in Oregon that has all of its teachers formally trained in standards-based assessment literacy. And we have each teacher assigned to a PLC, and we have early release, so we provide the time for those professional learning communities to meet as well. This is the first year for implementing the assessments. Last year, we trained all of our teachers, and we began writing them. And as those assessments are written, they will be implemented at that time as well. And so by the end of this year, we will have our assessments, our common assessments, for the most part implemented. And I expect to see that translate into student achievement. If you click on let's see, how do we want to do this? Do you have the PDF I sent you on your computer as well? This is where it gets a little...
Through the link, Scott, it wanted me to log in. It didn't go.
I didn't have
to the PDF
access.
link.
Did you go in through your email?
Yeah, but it asked for a password and everything. Yeah, I went through my email.
Same issue.
Yours did the same?
Yep.
How about... Okay. Okay. Let me do this real quick. If I emailed it, could you pull it up?
Yeah, if you, like a PDF or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll
that'd be
email
great.
it. I'll email it to you all. Here we go. Thank you for your patience. This is where the wonkiness kind of goes in. So I am sending it to you right now. There you go. So if it's even possible, if you could have one window on one side and the presentation on the other, maybe that might work for you. Otherwise, we'll just do the best we can.
I'm not having much of a problem seeing.
You're not?
Yeah, I
Okay.
can see that, no problem.
The only reason I wanted you to pull up the district goals on the PDF is that you can click academic experience right there. You see it? And I can't do that on the screen.
I can do it from the link here.
And if you see that, then the outline of a flywheel comes up, and you can see two things: adult actions and results indicators. Do you see that? I don't need to go over each and every one of you with each and every one of you right now what this says word for word, but I'll go through a couple if I could. So one of the things we want to know when we set an if-then goal is, okay, what are the adult actions that are going to lead you to that then statement? And so on the left-hand side, you'll see the adult actions, exactly what we're trying to do this year to achieve the desired results. And so if you look at the first bullet point, consistent implementation of projection maps and unit maps in all SFSD schools K-12. We are now at a point in our fourth school year as a school district where every single classroom will be implementing standards-based instruction and assessment. And so when we say that we're mapping out all of our standards and grouping them into units so we know exactly when and where they will be taught, what we expect students to learn, and how we'll know when they've learned it, that's the reason why it's implemented across the board as a system. So we will see that this year. We're also going into year 4 of our implementation of data team cycles. So year 4 of guaranteeing a viable curriculum is when we implement data team cycles, I should say. And so all of our teachers will be trained in October in their teacher teams. Now that we have common standards-based assessments, we can come together as teacher teams to talk about, okay, we taught unit 1. Why did Tom's kids do better than my kids? Because we all taught the same unit that we planned together. And what are you doing, Tom, that worked? And what did I do that didn't work? And how do we keep what Tom did and maybe not do what I did so that all of our kids benefit from those strategies? So that's a simplistic view of a data team cycle, but we're really talking about once every 4 to 6 weeks, that will be happening. So once a unit is taught, then teacher teams will come together to talk about what does your data look like? What did you intend to teach versus exactly what did your kids learn? That's the most important part for goal 1, that we're going from an intended curriculum to a learned curriculum. So an intended curriculum is, well, this is what I'm going to teach, right? This is what I'm intending to teach, and I may have taught all of that, but the missing piece, because we've never had standards-based assessment, is how do I know if our kids got it? How do I know if they even learned it? And so that's the piece of going from an intended curriculum to a learned curriculum. And that's what makes our instructional model in Silver Falls so unique. And so the others really have to do with that, the common assessment, and then the professional development we provide teachers. And then on the right side under results indicators, That's basically just what does it look like, feel like, sound like? What does that look like in terms of success of those adult actions? And I've just laid it out there for you, that we'll see focused agendas and norms being used by all PLC teams, focused monitoring of map and assessment completion and use by school leaders. We have a special way that school leaders monitor this and are able to provide feedback. 100% of teachers using projection and unit maps K-12, as well as summative assessments as they are completed and audited. So we finish writing standards-based assessments, and we also have a teacher team of auditors. So we have 6 or 7 auditors who are teachers in the district who take those assessments and then go through, okay, looks good. They're aligned to assessments, and they have these things that are required to be considered a appropriate assessment to be used. We also have focused walkthrough frameworks that we use with our school leaders and a whole host of other things, but that gives you a general idea for goal number 1. Any questions there? That really is the wind in our sails, is goal number 1. That is what we are here to do, to teach and to help kids learn.
So under adult actions, bullet number 4, the common summative assessment, that's one of the big parts of your superintendent goal.
Yes.
Getting that, right?
Yep. And if we go back to goal number 1, that's all about shifting from intended curriculum to learned curriculum.
And that's where the teamwork comes in, because we can't act as a team. Groups of teachers can't act on the data unless it's common data.
That's right. We have to know that all students were assessed with the same assessment, but with the proficiency bar set at the time before instruction begins. So the team knows what they're shooting for. And if we don't do that with standards-based assessment, what happens is, if we're a team of 7 teachers, we don't know where the bar is. So the proficiency bar is always moving throughout every unit because we've never established it to begin with. Because we didn't take the standard and then figure out how we're going to assess it before we plan for instruction. Does that make sense?
I got a question for you, Scott.
Yes.
I liked your analogy or your explanation of we're teaching a set of skills, but how do you actually know that they ever have learned what we've taught? Well, how do we gauge whether they learned it or not?
Well, I would say that Silver Falls is not unique in any way, shape, or form. But I don't know how we can assess as a school system how we are doing if our assessments are not written to standards, are not common, and are not audited. Then in my opinion, everybody's sort of doing something different. So as a principal or somebody trying to maneuver resources to help schools in the most efficient way possible, there's no way we can base those decisions. And using state testing is totally inappropriate to do that. Because that's a 1 year, we wait 6 months to get the results and all of that. So if that answers your question.
Well,
so we can't go from everybody doing their own thing.
No, I guess I don't quite understand. So if we're not testing, or maybe state testing, how do we gauge? Is it assignments that are being graded daily? Is it?
Well, our teachers, when they're implementing unit maps, that instruction goes on for about 4 to 6 weeks. And in between there might be some formative assessments that the teacher teams are doing, but for the most part, that unit's going to end. And those are all on our website. They're all public, so our public knows when that instruction's going to end. And that's when teachers assess.
So
And
they're developing tests
at the end of each unit that every teacher gives.
Okay.
And then they compare the results in groups, and then they see, okay, what did you do that I didn't do because your results are higher than mine?
So
Or-
there is some type of
They're
like
common.
question, answer,
Yes.
do you know the material?
So if you and I both taught history, our
Yeah.
tests are exactly the
Choose, yeah,
same.
yeah,
You know, they're
gotcha.
common because we developed them as a
I just
teacher
wasn't sure
cohort.
if we were testing information or not, you know, at the end of each section, so, cool.
And this is year 4 of our implementation. If you were on the board back in 2020, I came to you around September with a implementation plan and said, this is what it's going to look like. And we were starting on the left-hand side of 2020, and it's hard to believe we're moving into year 4 of what I told you at that time would be a 5-year implementation. And so after 5 years, we will then be saying goodbye to the professional developers we've brought in to help us with our work, and we will have made this self-sustaining, and we will continue the work ourselves as a school district. And so that's pretty exciting, actually. And I never thought we'd get here this quickly because of COVID, but our teacher teams and our staff never made excuses. We knew the day would come when we'd get through it, and we knew we would have one heck of a hole to fill for our student body. And so I'm really proud of our staff as well for that. Missing a slide. Well, we can go back on the other sheet to read slide number, or goal number 2. I don't know why it's not coming up here. But that has to do with a sense of belonging. And also, I wanted to tie in what a multi-tiered system of support looks like once we have a solid core program. And so goal number 2 is to build a system-wide infrastructure and readiness for consistent and uniform data-driven responses to students' academic growth and social emotional well-being, thereby strengthening their own sense of belonging. And so we would not have been able to implement goal number 2 until this year because we did not have consistent and uniform data. And now we're on the precipice of having consistent and uniform data district-wide. And so that's the first thing that's really huge. So we know if our system's healthy, and then we know whether or not our students are not making progress as they should. And so on this slide here, sense of belonging, and this is where it gets a little technical, but the first under adult action says implement year 1 of a multi-tiered academic and behavioral system of support. And the first bullet says universal screening and reading intervention implemented at all K-5 classrooms. This is very significant. I would say out of all the information that I present tonight, this is the most important piece. Because what we have to do as a school district is make sure that when kids enter the system in kindergarten, they enter the system, we know exactly where they are, what skills they've come to us with, and what they need to end the year reading. And so for the first time in Silver Falls District's history, every single one of our K1 and 2 teachers has been trained in guided phonics, which actually is the science of teaching reading. And we are implementing guided phonics in every single classroom, K1 and 2 in the district. So no child is going to slip by who can't break the code of reading. Teaching reading and teaching language are 2 totally separate concepts. In teaching language, you can learn sort of by absorbing the patterns and mimicking what your parents are telling you, that sort of thing. But to teach children that a T makes the T sound, and that those sounds can be manipulated into forming other words. There's a specific science for how the synapses in the brain work. And that training is new for our staff, but I will tell you, it's also become very popular. And so if you have conversations with teachers in the primary grade, you might want to ask them what they think about guided phonics and are they seeing the growth that students are making. There's no reason in the world, I don't care what school district it is, that a kindergartner should ever leave that grade level not reading. There's no excuse in the world. And if they do, that 1 to 2% of kids, then those are the kids we may suspect a severe learning disability, and that would not be their fault. That means they just need something different. But I just want to make sure that that's clearly understood, that there really is, there's absolutely no excuse because we know exactly what to do. And so if that goes back to sense of belonging, making sure that every child has the skills to feel good about themselves, to be a complete participant within the community of learning that they're in every day, that really goes back to building that sense of community and sense of belonging. All of the other bullet points there are rather technical. I am more than happy to go through them if you'd like me to, but I think that example I gave you about K1 and 2 reading is the best representation of what a multi-tiered system of support does for our kids. If they're not responding to, say, a whole group instruction of guided phonics, then teachers can come back and say, okay, now what do I do with that child? I can pull a smaller group. During the school day, I can have one of our instructional assistants take a group of kids and work on this skill. But it's all because we can assure that all kids are getting great instruction first. Then we can figure out at what level do kids need after that.
Can you explain the inclusive school scan?
Yeah. So one of the things I've wanted to implement for a while now is how do we know when a community member visits a school, how do they know it's a high functioning school? So because the public works hard at their own jobs every day, it's not realized by our public just how many best practices are going on within a school and what they are. And so the inclusive scan is really a framework where we can go in and say, yeah, all these things are present. You know, all these things are present. Teachers are greeting kids before the day begins. Learning targets are clearly posted. There's a time for every child each day to have a chance to speak. Those types of things. And those are all outlined in that link there. In inclusive scan. It's something I've wanted to do for the past couple of years, but we just haven't been in a place where we've been able to do that, and I think now we are. And that'll give us a good benchmark and data point to talk to our principals about, just as a means of discussion. Any other questions there? It gets a lot more technical, and I hope that I'm not confusing you. But again, I'm happy to go through all of it if you like. Otherwise, I can continue. This is a visual of what a multi-tiered system of support looks like. And tier 1 would be what we're doing with standards-based teaching and learning. That's what all kids get. Every child needs universal access to high-quality content. And otherwise, we're just playing the educational lottery. If I get Dr. Ort for a teacher, I've got a maid. If I got Mr. Drew as a teacher, well, I'm totally out of luck. And it should never be that way. Every teacher that a child is assigned to, that student should have access to high quality content. And those teachers have access to each other to plan units that are high quality. That's tier 1. Extension enrichment, that's for kids who are working beyond grade level. What are we doing for those kids? So in a multi-tiered system of support, it's not just for kids who need more because they're academically deficient. It's also for kids who need more because they're just at a different level than the other kids cognitively. And so that's another part of multi-tiered systems that we want to take a look at. Because it's not okay if we have Owen Von Flew in the back of the class doodling because he's already mastered everything that he's been given. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That we still need to have a laser focus on that group of kids and what we're doing for them. The opposite of that would be what we would call dumbing down the curriculum, right? So that everybody gets the same and it's right down the middle. And to me, that's educational malpractice, and we would never involve ourselves in that. So this is a process by saying which kids need what. And that really goes back to what student educational equity is all about. We all know what the proficiency level is. We want to get all kids there or beyond, but each kiddo needs something a little bit different to get there, that's all. The other parts in the tier 2 and 3, that's when we're suspecting things where if we don't act now, a child's chances of having choices after high school start to diminish exponentially. And just like under goal number 1, all kids will be on track to graduate. It means when we suspect that a child is moving into tier 2 or tier 3, we need a plan. And so as a superintendent, I will consider it a personal failure if we have kids coming up through the grades and we don't know if this child ever had a plan or not to get up to grade level. And that's a lot of our academic work. This is part of the synergy system that we will be implementing. This goes right into multi-tiered systems of support in terms of the plans that we make for kids and when teachers meet to discuss students' needs. This is a tab that was developed that will be incorporated into Synergy, which is our new student information system. So when teacher teams come together to talk about kids who aren't making progress as they should, they will have all of the data in front of them. From attendance, to classes, to skills, to all of their common summative assessments and in-program intervention assessments. So you can see if you're looking at that type of a dashboard for one kid, you've got all the information in front of you instead of shuffling through papers that you may or may not have. So, and this keeps data intact year after year. So if we get a student in 8th grade that is 4 years below grade level, we can take a look back to see what happened and where did the child start not to respond to the instruction that they were getting. That's what makes this database so powerful, this information system. It's even more than a database. And that is in our new Synergy student information system that we did not have before. Any questions on goal number 2?
Yeah, can you go back to that last slide real quick?
Sure, right there.
Is this something just that the teachers have access to, or is this going to be part of the synergy that the parents also have access to?
Well, parents wouldn't, this wouldn't be for parents, this screenshot here.
Well, I'm not asking that they would, I just was curious.
Will they have access to Synergy, you mean?
Well, I was just curious if this is what it looks like. I honestly haven't been inside yet for
Yeah.
my kid, so.
It'll look different, but parents will have access to Synergy through Parent View and all of that. Yeah. And this will be more for an internal use. And you can imagine if a kiddo's a senior in high school having 13 years worth of data stored.
So each one of
That's
these things
phenomenal.
would be a profile for each student?
Yes, correct.
That's impressive.
Yep.
How,
Very, very exciting.
how and when does this data get entered?
Well, it's interesting because we can merge databases with this also. It just depends on what assessments are being recorded. So with common formative assessments, there will be a process for how we record those grades or how teacher teams record those grades. And then we can take that information and dump it in here.
So there'd be like an entering phase. Teachers would have to enter,
Business.
and then after that, they would
Yes.
be referred by anyone.
Yeah, at one point, somebody has to enter a score. But what we want is to make that be the only time, and then we can take it all from there and sort it out and all of that.
For some of our other program assessments that are standardized, they all they need to sign a data sharing agreement where so all their star scores, all their civil scores, all that automatically gets pulled in that system. So it fills up their profile after the testing is done.
All state data and all that gets incorporated also. Not just reading common assessments, but when we start math as well, all those will be rolled over as well. So it will become a very, very robust student information system. Any other questions for goal 2? Okay, goal 3. Goal 3 is facilities in the strategic plan. And we have operationalized that to say that we needed a long-range facilities planning committee to determine a long-range plan, a 10-year plan for our facilities. And then after that, what that work told us was we need a bond, which was not a big mystery to anybody. But this has been a public process, and that process has taken us some time. The theory of action here is really simple, and that is we pass the bond or we don't pass the bond. There's just 2 really straightforward answers of yes or no. And so the first one is if we do pass, if the general obligation bond passes, then we can begin the process to ensure the long-term viability of Silver Falls School District. And I think we'd all agree that yes, that is exactly what we will do. If the general obligation bond does not pass, then we will regroup and assess our situation moving forward. That's what we'll do. Any questions on that?
Well, on the whole premise here, excuse me, of goals, I struggle with trying to wrap my mind around how, as a board, we use goals such as this in an evaluative process. They're, as far as personal to Scott Drew, superintendent, and the job being done. And, you know, I hear what you were saying earlier about, the 80% thing, but then again, there almost needs something concrete, measurable, what decides if student outcomes will improve or core instruction and intervention improve quality and focus?
Well, and that's,
What
and that's where you'll see this page here, where I talk about the specific things that we will be doing and what that will look like. And I will have some data to share, but it'll be a mix.
Sorry, I didn't mean to-
No, go right ahead.
There will also be check-ins along the way as per the superintendent evaluation process and timeline where Scott will share his progress during the year.
Yeah,
on
but my
how
point
we're
is, what are
doing
we
it.
checking the progress on?
Would be these goals, and then also at the end of mainly these goals, he'll provide interim check-ins on how he's doing towards these goals.
If you look at the evaluation process documents that we passed last time and refer to that process, that could be a little more illuminating for how we do that. I am trying to look for them right now.
Well, I was gonna say, I had gone through them, but
And I'll come back to you, Phil, with evidence
Yeah.
as well to show.
And he'll frame his check-ins around these goals mainly as a talking
There's
points.
a 4-point scale that we use
yeah.
for each goal. So it's subjective in a sense,
but we've got the 4 points. Is that a good representation of how we've done it in the past?
Well, I remember it was right before I came on. It's one of the last meetings. I thought we also came up with, Leslie was doing a report on goals, where we're at with reading, and we had to turn in goals to the state or something. Am I off on that?
Well, that had to do with integrated guidance.
Yeah.
That's
So,
for the whole district, and this is specifically Scott's goals, because
Yeah.
we're using these ones to evaluate.
I would imagine they overlap a little bit, because I would imagine that those goals would parallel some
Well,
of
they're
yours.
indicators.
for sure, for sure.
Indicators.
Yeah. If you're looking for a number, I don't think you're going to find one.
No, I'm not, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, the then statement,
Mhm.
how is that shown?
And that's what I try to,
And other than just the adult actions? And then I guess my next question is, what I'm used to, is it more incorporated into this instead of just trying to stand alone? And it would be part of this, because, these are the goals, then how is that assessed?
right, and that's where the result indicators come in.
And
Okay.
he'll give us.
And then my job is to bring evidence to support that.
Yeah, he brings
Okay.
evidence every quarter to show us, and so there's not just one piece of data, there's a bunch of them.
So in other words, for the bond, and that's this one here, the adult actions on this are minimal compared to years past. Really has to do with managing the campaign and then setting up the bond oversight and safe harboring language and all that.
Right.
But the results indicator, Phil, is does it pass or does it
Well,
not
yeah,
pass?
that one's pretty black and white.
Right.
That-
But in the ones that can't be black and white, there are still results indicators. There are still ways to know whether or not this is being effective.
Mhm.
And that's what you would see in the other two.
I mean, I've got a comment on the bond, Scott, granted, because I've been kind of on it from the beginning, is, engagement with the public or
Mhm.
constituents. How many listening sessions did you do?
19.
So I'm just speaking, you put a lot into this. And
Well, so last
so,
year,
like, how many meetings, how many PTCCs like you've done? I think the max you could do, so.
well, and last year that was under the results indicators.
He brought those to us in our check-ins and how many, listening sessions and things he did. I mean, that was the evidence of
Mhm.
that goal and how he's progressing on that goal.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the superintendent evaluation workbook right now, and basically, for each goal, Scott presents his, performance indicators, and then we rate it on the 1 to 4 scale.
Yeah.
And then we, discuss those ratings and come to speak with one voice
Yeah.
all together.
Yeah.
Versus you come to one meeting versus 19.
I would say if you looked at, just talking about superintendent's work, if you look at the district as a whole over the last 3 years, what would be some of the results indicators? Number one would be that we have fully mapped our curriculum, literacy in K-5, and all the subject areas in 612. We have divided all of our teachers, assigned all of our teachers to a PLC. We have early release time. We have all of our units going back to those MAP standards completed. We have 100% of our teachers trained in standards-based assessment literacy. We have all of our assessments, 100% of our standards-based assessments in English language arts completed in elementary. And the list would go on. So those are real tangible things.
That's
Yeah.
what I was asking.
And that's what you'll see.
Yeah, okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yep, he'll present those.
Yeah. Now, the only thing I wanted to say on the bond, this process has become so emotional for me because I think over the past 3 years, 90% of my life has been wrapped up in this process. But I think it's good that we just revisit for a minute all of the incredible things we've been through together. This visual here represents sort of the 5 or 6 year process of where this all started in 2017, 2018 with a population study to say, okay, how big do we think our district's going to get and what do we think our needs might be? And then the board commissioned a strategic plan. Jerry came in and helped with that, Jerry Colonna. And then a long-range facilities planning process started in 19 with a architecture firm that then went by the wayside, and we went with BLRB. I came in July 1, 2020, and that's really the orange box there, and had been neck deep in this work for that amount of time into what have now been, since I've been here, 49 public meetings. And we're talking about K-8 work groups. We're talking about that design the K-8 listening sessions, the first round, designing the second round of listening sessions. And there was 19 listening sessions in all. Half of them were done under COVID, under tents, outside, and late fall. And that rolled into writing a report about that, asking our K-8s what they want for their future, then going back to our K-8s and saying, this is what we heard from you, and this is what we are going to move forward into the long-range facilities plan that the board at that time approved 7-0. And then the formation of a bond advisory committee and spending a year coming up with what will that recommendation look like, which was also a monumental effort to get to that point, and now to be on the tail end of what the election campaign has become. Absentee ballots get mailed out the week of the 16th, 3 weeks from now. We are coming up to, at least in my estimation, one of the most critical results that will affect this school district in our lifetime. I don't know how you can't get emotional about that. That's pretty special. And some of you that I've worked with going on 4 years now on this subject, Tom, Jennifer, Aaron, you were on the long range. We started working together from day one. I feel like we've shared foxholes together. We've been through a lot. And those of you who've come on board have worked with me in the past also on listening sessions or on different committees. And I think this is something that we can walk away and say, whatever happens, we gave it everything we had. And I hope you feel the same way too. Having said that, that's my presentation. And I'll take any questions you might have. Questions or comments.
Very well thought out. I appreciate all the thought that you put into it, and you do a great job of presenting to us along the way too. So thanks for the future efforts that I know you'll put in as well.
Well, it's a pleasure to work for you. Thank you. Oh, perfect. That means we're alive.
Yeah.
That means we're alive. Seriously.
Thanks for coming to talk to us about TAG, Melissa.
Okay, so just to make sure we're all on the same page, I know you guys have been reviewing some policy changes that were recommended by OSBA, and those were based on some changes in the OARs and the statutes around tag identification that came out last school year. And so tonight is just a review of what those major changes are and how that's changed our tag plan and services for students. And those have been submitted to ODE. student needs something different. And what I want to say to you is the new changes are actually, as a teacher at heart, always very refreshing, because the way that tag used to be structured, there were a lot of hoops and whistles, and it was very limiting on who we could serve for tag and who we could identify. And what I do feel like this has happened is it's created more flexibility to give us the chance to give kids what they need when they're already reaching standards. So that's what we're going to talk about. So I think when we talk about tag students, we talk about challenging and gifted students. A lot of the times, I know for me early in my career, what came to mind were these kids who were just really bright and high achieving in lots of areas. They were always like well behaved, they wanted to achieve, they wanted to do well, they were liked by their peers and teachers. And then if I just basically put something in front of them that was challenging, that they could take it and run with it, they really didn't need a lot of help from me. And that is not exactly what we know about being talented and gifted. Now we know that giftedness is complex, and that it's not just limited to academic performance or a single academic measure. We know that being gifted and talented and being a high achieving student are not the same thing. You can be one or the other and both. And the giftedness is multifaceted. I want you to think about some of the great geniuses of our time. And they weren't just known for usually their achievements that could be measured. They were also known for the way their minds worked in ways that were beneficial and ways that were complex. And so the new practice, the new policy really allows us to identify students with more flexibility and to meet their entire needs, not just academic. Does that make sense? Okay, sure. So when we are in the process of identifying students for talented and gifted, we usually send out surveys or questionnaires to their families. They might fill it out for themselves to their local students, their teachers. These are also true about tag students, and we ask people to rate gifted students on their attributes. Do they directly challenge authority? Do they typically question rules or policies? Do they argue? Do they appear spaced out and fast or seem preoccupied? Are they disruptive by being witty, sarcastic, or comical? Do they seem to figure out what annoys people and then deliberately avoid them on purpose? Are they controlling? Do they have poor test performance? Does their daily work frequently incomplete or poorly done? One of the things that I know about giftedness is that it also can sometimes come to sensitivities or excitabilities. There's a lot of anxiousness in some of our gifted students for perfection, and especially like if things have come easy to you for your entire life, and then pretty soon you hit that wall where not everything is coming at that same level. It challenges everything you know about yourself, everything you think about yourself, and you've always been a performer, maybe, and so then you're wondering if there's some complexities around that. And it can lead often to underachievement instead of overachievement. Because it's easier to blow something off and not take the risk of maybe not achieving where you think you should, or where someone around you thinks you should, and maybe and your mind's also working very fast all the time. So tag is complex. Those things are all true for all students, but those things definitely run through the gifted community as well, and they don't always fit this mold. They often fit both of those molds. So what we are charged with doing with our new legislation, with our new policy, is how do we provide more flexibility in the way that we can provide identification and allows us to get students the support and service they need, whether they fit the traditional mold of talented and gifted genius, or whether they fit a non-traditional mold of talented and gifted genius. Does that make sense? Because I think we could all agree that both those people had giftedness up there, but I'm not sure that Prince and Urkel might have scored the same on their SATs or on their Oregon State tests. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So when we talk about this is used at our tag meetings and then talk about the changes, what we're charged with is the old system really forced kids to fit into the system. Like, you could only be talented and gifted if you met this very narrow criteria. And really what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to create a system where the kids can all flourish. And instead of making them work gently in one way. Does that make sense? So, before tag students are talented and gifted, they are core students. They are students who are getting access to all of the learning that our teachers are providing, and Scott did a great job of setting it up. So, we spend a lot of time looking, have y'all seen this triangle before? What represents core instruction? So, we give core instruction to everybody, and our goal, if we think that we have a strong core instruction, is that 80% or better of our students are going to be successful with it at the end of the learning cycle, right? That 80% will have done what they need and can move on to the next. We know there's going to be a few that need some additional supports to get there, and then we know there's going to be a small percent at the top that needs some individualized supports to get there. With me on that? When we look at this as education, a lot of times we're always talking about the students who need more as far as they're below standard, but really with TAG, you also want to use it to look at who needs more, who are going above the standard. So we're going to give our instruction, and at the end, there's going to be a group, the 80% of students should be successful, but there's probably always going to be a group of students who are ready for more, who are ready for extension, who are ready for enrichment in something, who can think more deeply or more critically about what they've learned. And then there's going to be a student or two that just go well beyond that, to the where the teacher's I can't even feed it to them fast enough, and then I can't even get them, they're challenging me and asking me questions that are making me have to really think about this. And that's truly that talented and gifted. When we talk about individual identification, what we want to be looking at are who are those kids who need something more individualized than what we are able to provide within our structure. The kids at school, I say this, or this. Okay, so like I said, in the past, for the last 27 years, as long as I've been a teacher, there was really only one way to identify a student as TAG. They had to show an inkling of viability, but that had to be confirmed with some kind of standardized test. Whether that was an SAT, an Oregon State test, a cognitive ability test like the WISP or the Wisconsin. They had to, in a sampling of 100 people, they had to score within the top 4. So, as you can, I don't know about you, but I would not want to be judged on the outcome of a test I took one day in high school and I only had one chance to take a year. Because I don't know that it would capture my brilliance or my struggle, depending on the day. But that's kind of how TAG works. So we have these indicators that show that they are high achieving, that they need more, but they only scored at the 95th percentile, so we can't qualify them. Or they're only the top 10%. Really, that's a sad thing, because I think about as a teacher, how many kids we held back from getting what they needed because they didn't have this magic score on a standardized test. They also had kind of how it used to be and how it's done better. But they usually would look at those characteristics that we talked about at the beginning. Most of the kids who were identified in the TAG program did that traditional model because that's what we were looking for originally. So, make sure I call it out so I told you everything. I can get off track. We know that we have a special population, whether it's an honors class or whether it's talented and gifted, it should mirror your population, meaning your demographic. But if we look at, and this is what I'm talking about like this, because we left our window so narrow on what we were accepting as TAG, which was mandated to us, our TAG population often looks very similar, our identified TAG population. So what the new changes have provided for us is in a way to cast a wider net in our population so that we are not having this strict checklist of things that have to be met. One shot, one day, once a year is the gateway to be getting what you need or not. So this is an overview of the new TAG statute, and basically what it says is that a talented and gifted child is a child who requires something above and beyond what is normally provided within the core and that they've demonstrated the ability, achievement in either cognitive achievement or academic achievement. So it's two-pronged. They have to have shown high achievement, and they have to have a need that is not being met within the core program. And I think that's really important because I think that a lot of teachers figured out long ago that even if a student could not get identified as tag because they didn't meet the requirement, that didn't mean teachers weren't serving kids in classrooms. They were giving them challenge, they were giving them enrichment, they were giving them what they could within that setting. So the new requirement is like, it's not about being identified, which it used to be, that used to be the big thing. It's like, I want my kids to be called, to be tag. I want this, my students to be identified as tag. Now it's about seeking out service. Like, what is a need that is unmet, and how are we going to meet it now? So it also, the rules also allow us to not have to compare our students in Silver Falls to students everywhere, but it also can allow us to do that. It allows us flexibility to look at our best and brightest students that live right in our district and serve those whose needs need to be met, even if they are fall short of that standard 95th percentile. We are allowed to accommodate our own scale based on our individual points. So, what I love about this new system, from a teaching perspective, is that it creates multiple pathways for a student to receive services for tag and identification. And I'll go over those in just a second. But what I also appreciate is that instead of having one single measure be the ticket tag, now part of the requirement is we're looking at a body of evidence representing that student. So you might look at their achievement results and they might have 96th percentile, but you're also going to be looking at the common assessments that we're giving, the standards-based assessments we're giving in our classrooms. You might also look at some screening. You might have a writing sample. You have checklists. You're looking at the whole child instead of looking at one piece of one child and making a decision about what they deserve in our school or not. Okay. And it's based on a preponderance of evidence. So even if they fall short of one thing, like they're not, no one struggles in all things and no one's a genius in all things. So it allows them to be a human child that has strengths and deficits, and there's not one single measure that disqualifies them or that singularly qualifies them for tag. Yep. Okay. So this is our newly updated, this is our plan that's been submitted. There are being multiple ways that we are looking for tag identification. Previously, it would only take a referral usually, like a parent, a teacher, the student themselves saying, I think that the student needs more, what can we do for that? But now we have a way of screening and a way of when you think about like a colander and you flip your needles and everything runs through, we have kind of a net that we're casting even without referral, so that we can self-identify our students even if someone's not coming forward with a referral for them. So the first way we're going to do that is we give a universal screener, like we do for reading, or like we do for math. We give it once a year, and we give it in, and it's a cognitive abilities assessment. It's called the COGAP. So it's the cognitive abilities test. And it's a screening test we give it 2nd, 4th, and 7th grade. And there's a way to kind of look at the top 10 to 15% of the kids in our district who scored that, and dive deeper into their files to say, is there evidence here that says we should be looking at this student for tag identification? That happens no matter what. They take the assessment, they score in the highest range, and then we are going to kind of do our due diligence to either gather more evidence and say, yes, we can move forward with this, or we're not really sure that there's enough evidence to support that at this time. The second way is from our MTSS system that Scott was just talking about. So at the end of their grading cycle, kids are going to take these standards-based assessments. They're going to either demonstrate that they are not near proficiency, they are meeting nearly proficient, or that they can go far beyond the standard. If we have students who are copying every single time, as kids who can go above and beyond grade level every single time in different areas, then we're going to look at that as a pattern of strength, and we're going to start looking, okay, this student has aced out every single standard-based assessment we've given in 3rd grade. Let's go look a little deeper with the student and see if there's other evidence that there's a need here. Because clearly, if they're maxing out every then they might need more than what we're currently providing them for. Okay? And then there's the old-fashioned way, which is a referral from qualitative data. Quantitative is numbers, qualitative is story, thought words. So it could be on teacher observation, principal observation, parent observation, that the referral is given, that I would really like the student looked at, because I think they have a need that's not being met, and then we're able to gather a variety of body of evidence on them and make a decision as a team. So that's essentially, it's a wider net that we're getting to be able to cast now to identify what this tag. And it's not just based on one thing, although it can be, one of those things can also be a part of that evidence. Yes? I talked about the fact that with the new legislation, we can look at localized norms, which means we can look at the top 10 to 15% of the highest performing kids in Silver Falls, and we can have their permission, whether they have a 96 percentile score or not, to look and see if they need more and to be able to provide that to them. I really like that. Because to be compared to a student who grew up in a non-rural setting or in a different area of the state or even area of the country, there's a lot of factors that go into kids' performance, and we want to make sure that we are identifying the students who are at the top of our performance and giving them what they need to even realize their full potential. So again, after a student is identified, we really have the opportunity to customize their service plan. So once a student has gone through that process and we bring it together and we determine that yes, they have a need that goes beyond what can be provided in the classroom, we're able to kind of custom fit a plan for the student based on what their, just like I said, giftedness is complex. And not all students show giftedness in the same way, so it allows us to kind of individualize what is needed and make a plan that fits their unmet need. And this is a lot of this, like Jennifer shared in her email to you, a lot of it is done within the classroom, but some of it can be done within the school as well, by putting things together, providing them opportunities. And these are probably some of the ones that are the most common in our school district right now as far as how we meet hierarchies and down and get the needs in our school. So, I don't know if I answered all your questions, but now I'm ready for your questions. I saw your questions in your emails, I tried to include all of them in how I explain this, but I know sometimes things will look in my mind. Do you guys have questions about tag? About the new changes? Do you need answers to break and move forward on the policies and things like that?
I have one question. I'm just wondering, with the wider net, how many kids do you expect to catch in a district like ours?
So again, it should you expect your tag students are going to be about the top 5% of your 5 to 10%. So in a district our size, we should have 10%. I would say would be a good round number. But I know that we've I've identified kids for a long time. At my school at Silvercrest, right now I have one tag identified student and 138 students.
And Melissa's right, it should be 10%.
10%.
10% of any school population should be talented and gifted.
And what I like about it is that it's you're looking for not just the kids who meet that criteria, but the kids whose needs aren't already being met. Because there are teachers who are working really hard to differentiate instruction and provide the challenge they need. So this is really a means not to just get the stamp that you are tag identified, but that your needs are being met by us as a collective.
I like the way this has gone. I mean, the movement's had from what it was because it was so restrictive before. How does this, being this way though, as far as a student moving from one district to another and they're identified, how does that play out?
So each school district in Oregon basically had to revise their tag plan to make it more flexible. They didn't tell us exactly what the percentages had to be, but you had to have multiple ways of identifying students. You had to have different pathways, a collection of evidence. So each district probably the percentages are maybe a little bit differently. But once a student is identified as a tag student in Oregon or in anywhere else, that's one of the things in our plan, it goes with that. Okay. So if they go to another district, they would review that eligibility and be like, yes, we agree based on what's here. And all of our students agreement was like, yeah, we're in agreement that this was a valid tag identification.
So it probably is in the state system that like when you get a new student from a new district, just like if they're an EL student,
Yes.
that's different because before, I know that in Woodburn, we had our own cutoffs that were much more generous than they were here or
Yes.
in the state.
We
And
had
so,
that first.
yeah, so you would just have to do a review of the CUME file in order to determine if they qualified or not. So that's interesting that they're opening it up and saying any tag identification that happens in the state of Oregon, we will honor. The next school district should honor.
Yeah, and it's not like a rubber stamp, like, oh, you've been tag identified, and like, also go somewhere and identify you here, but what you are required to do is to review their identification, review the evidence that was there, and to kind of confirm, reaffirm it, or maybe do some of your own investigation too, is like, okay, we see this is here, this looks a little bit different than what we've had here, so
Okay, got
maybe we'll give them a COGAT, a screener, or maybe we'll, look at some of their, like, we just did our assessment screening, let's see how they're, oh yeah, they're in the 99th percentile and star, let's go ahead and just say that we can agree that our data is starting to show that, and we can do your own as well.
Got it.
But I do like the groups with them.
It does make things a little more complicated, a
Yes.
little more complex, and the adults who are in charge have to spend a little more time probably on this process.
And actually, in some ways, I really appreciate that, because I'm sure that, I had as a teacher, students who clearly needed more, that there were definitely roadblocks and barriers in the whole system that kept me from being able to get them what they needed, and there were kids who really checked all the boxes, but really their needs were being met and didn't need something additional, so it creates flexibility, and whenever there's flexibility, there's complexity.
Yeah, I do like that unmet need piece because that's the whole point of having a program.
Yes, yes.
So I just have a few, so I understand though, everything. It kind of goes with, what it was said earlier. Growing up, we had a designated tag teacher. Do we have any of those anymore? Like that's all they do is just tag?
The short answer is no.
Okay.
I know that, I grew up in Oregon too, we used to have a tag pull-out program, that was
Yeah.
like an enrichment program. I would say I haven't seen one of those in many schools for a long time, and most of it to do with funding. We have tag liaisons that work at each building that are kind of the tag go-between, and they have knowledge of the testing, they have knowledge of what tag is, they get trained every year, and they're kind of the overseers, but really we're able to meet, it's kind of to look at that to say, what can be met within the classroom? They have ideas on how to meet it within the classroom, and help support teachers on how you can meet higher needs in the classroom if they don't know kind of what to do next or what the next pathway is. But there isn't a tag teacher that the student goes to for instruction. At the high school, they do also have a tag advisory or a tag elective that students can elect to be a part of, and a lot of that has to do more with, the student has independent study or is dual enroll or taking an online course, they can do that. But also, sometimes some of the most gifted and brilliant people I know also need help with organization and deadlines and things like that. So it provides that social emotional piece as well.
Josh, one of the things that I used to do to explain the tag identification is that it really is a signal to the teacher that this child might need something different. And that's all, because those enrichment opportunities aren't necessarily always going to be there because of funding or whatever, but the classroom experience is what every kid deserves to have, something that meets them at their level and their pacing. So
I see that. I guess where I'm really coming from is, there's going to be 10% of these type of students that need something extra, or our teachers with their already busy plates can be able to handle an additional assignment. I guess is where my head's at.
well, I think every kid is different in the classroom, and so teachers are already differentiating. That's really the thing, is that whether they're tag identified or not, it's very likely that their classroom teacher, especially in elementary, knows that they need something different and is already delivering it. The tag is just, again, like that signal, like, hey, this is a student that you need to pay attention to.
And a lot of times it's not something more, it's something different, right? Like I know, like, in
Oh, yeah,
Woodrow, something this is that I know you already have mastered. I'm gonna let you have this opportunity to do this and set this up for you over here.
It would look like to me that with all this new curriculum mapping and kind of seeing that chart from Synergy, that this might be easier to identify those kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it kind of just seems pretty parallel.
Yeah, I like it because how it used to be is that once a year we got our state test scores, we look at the chart, we go, oh, these kids were in the 96th or above, let's look at these kids for tag, and it was really kind of more subjective. I mean, I feel like it wasn't as like, let's dive deep into these kids and see what else is there, like fact finding, and then the gate was only open one time a year for kids to be identified, which is, this is creating multiple ways to have kids kind of rise to the surface for that. I think it's actually, in the long run, it's going to be, it creates fewer barriers to getting into thinking. And I think it gives us, I mean, also, if we're identifying students, it gives us that opportunity to work together as school teams. I mean, I think a lot of us do that in either cross-grade or cross classrooms. Finding those opportunities is going to give us the opportunity to do that.
Is there grant money associated if we do?
No, I'm not really sure about the monetary. I'm sure that there are, well, I know there are grants for like STEM, science, technology, and math. I think if we could pursue some of those types of grants to have that as another option of service, but grant, I don't know, who would be interested. I would love to, but I can't see myself having dollars right now.
Thank you.
Excellent job, Melissa.
Thank you, Melissa.
And anytime you can have a presentation with verbal and prints, it's a win.
Okay, well, let's move on then to our discussion items. We have some policy first reads. Let's just go down the list one at a time, except for those two that we excluded earlier. The first policy is EH, Records and Data Management. And I think Dan is on the call. Hi, Dan. Would you like to talk to us about records and data management?
Both. And now I'm echoey back at me. I don't know, Daniel, if you can fix that or not, or if I'm just going to have to tolerate it. But both the records and data management and the cybersecurity are just compliance with some new legislation and also with our insurance provider with PACE, at least the cybersecurity piece is. So there's nothing really to report here other than we are just making sure that we are having policies to make sure we're in compliance with law and in accordance with our insurance provider.
Did any board members have any comments or questions about that policy or that revision?
I just had an interesting one because of kind of my nature of work of how long I have to keep records, but the last sentence kind of covers it. It just says it's going to comply with all state and federal laws. Typically, the rule used to be in healthcare like 7 years. You have to hold records, but that's changing because of digital. So I would just imagine these laws regarding because of digital cloud-based storage and stuff that I'm sure they're going to change every couple of years just to make sure we stay on top of how those laws change. But I mean, the language is perfect. I was just making that comment from an administrative point to make sure we're staying on top of how it does change.
And there are certain ones, and I wouldn't know what they are off the top of my head, that we have to keep for a very long period of time, where we have records of employment records that go back 70 years. So if anybody ever wanted to do a historical archive of different contracts and things, there's some interesting materials at the DO.
I'm glad I'm not in charge of that department. All right, so let's move on then to EHB cybersecurity.
And this is one that we've just had to really beef up our cybersecurity on. Educational entities are one of the easiest targets for cybersecurity issues. And so being able to protect our information and just being able to protect our data is really important. And our IT director, Brett Milliken, attends regular trainings on making sure that we are up to speed on all things keeping our data safe.
Questions, comments from board members? All right, let's go on then to, I think that's it for first reads. So let's go to the policy second reads, and we'll just treat those, well, that's just there's just one. The interscholastic activities, and this is the one that was amended. We had a discussion last time we were here. And Dan, do you want to just summarize for us the change?
Yes, so the sentence in green that's on board book was the sentence that Derek Foxworth added or would like to see added, and so we brought it here for a second read so it can join its companion policies on October 9th for board approval. So don't think there was any other questions on this particular policy other than there was a discussion at the last board meeting around having a sentence that stresses the board's emphasis on teamwork, fair play, integrity, and general goodwill towards an opponent. And so that was the sentence that Derek wanted to have inserted. And so if there's any discussion about that, there can be. Otherwise, we would move that, add that sentence in for adoption on October 9th.
I'm glad, I like the way you organized that, Dan. Thank you for letting us see that. Well, I no, but you brought it to this meeting, so thank you for that.
Yes. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. No, and thanks to Derek for sure, because I think that was a good add. Any other comments?
I like the statement. I think it encapsulates everything we wanted to see in there.
Yeah, again, you can't argue with that. I think it's a really great statement. Okay, Dan, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, so just a couple quick, so that policy along with the tag policy, which we will be up for adoption on October 9th. So if there are any questions, because I know that we were really trying to time Melissa's presentation in advance of that tag policy, which will be on October 9th. And I also do appreciate the extra time to work on the policies that were removed from the agenda. And so I'll get those worked up for October work session.
I know that Melissa's presentation will help me understand. I'll read through again with the new knowledge that she brought to us. So again, thanks to administration for getting us that information. Anything else? All right. Without objection, meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Dan.